Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this session this afternoon. I'm really excited to have with me Michelle Roth and Tom Hickling from Microsoft. And over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to talk everything WVD. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Afternoon.
How are we?
All good, thanks. Yeah, and yourself?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Michelle, can we just do some introductions? Let's start with you. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, my name is Michel Roth, and I'm a what they call a Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt, which is the Microsoft way of saying that we specialize in one particular Microsoft service, which in our case is Windows Virtual Desktop. I work in a team for EMEA together with Tom and some other folks, and my area of focus is more on the business side of things, so more the business cases, customer success, and things like that.
Excellent, thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, so Tom Hickling. I am also a Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt in EMEA. So exactly the same team and virtually exactly the same role as Michelle, except for I'm more technically focused rather than sort of the commercial business side of it all.
Okay, great. Well, I've certainly had the privilege of working with both of you probably for many, many years. I dread to think how long our friendships and relationships go back, but thank you for being part of this session. Michelle, the topic and the theme of today is all about transformation, unite, bringing people together. We've heard stories from customers, and also Microsoft, Citrix already, about what they're doing in the EUC space. Have you got any stories you can share around how WVD has been helping transform businesses, particularly over the last 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. You can probably imagine, the last year has been a very interesting ride. So for those that have been around a little bit longer looking at WVD, we GA'd, so the version of WVD that's production ready, so the GA version is now, I think, let me look at the calendar, say like 16 months old or something like that. So it's not really old for a Microsoft product. Oftentimes they are around for longer, but we've seen the tremendous adoption. It's one of the fastest growing Azure services that Microsoft has. And of course, unfortunately, I should say it's due to COVID for a large part. We had a very healthy growth before COVID hit, but when COVID hit, it just accelerated tremendously. And it's something actually that, the silver lining is that in this really sad space and time that we are in now, we were able to help many customers. So if we look at some of the customer success stories that we have internally, we see that quite a few of them are what we call COVID related, or it's where we helped customers. I call it deliver remote productivity. So in many cases, that's remote working. For example, I won't name any customer specifically, but there's one of the largest banks in the world, which has, like many other banks, they have a lot of developers, right? So they're using WVD to make 10,000 remote workspaces available. And sometimes that's because they have to do something overnight. Sometimes it's a part of an existing strategy that they have that they now have to accelerate. But the underlying idea is the same, that with WVD you can achieve things that you could never do before, and it allows you to solve unique business problems that you also couldn't solve before. Another great example is actually from your neck of the woods, where we've been trying to help universities in the United Kingdom. And we're working, I think, up to closely to like 40 universities, and they had this tremendous struggle where, it was, I think COVID started like in March and April to really impact the mainland of Europe. but they had to still facilitate learning whilst the campuses were closed. So that was one very big problem that they have, and they didn't have weeks or months or years to do it. I think maybe many people listening to this, they've been around in the virtual desktop industry for a while, and we all know that if you are doing a project around EUC and virtual desktops, that if it's thousands of users, you're talking several months, right? At least from start to finish. But people simply didn't have this time, and WVD was able to help there, because as you know, it doesn't really matter what endpoint you have. So you can have a very lightweight endpoint that's very secure, but most importantly, you can deploy it in days or weeks versus several months, and that's exactly the speed that they needed. And the other side of it is that these are super uncertain times, right? So nobody really knows what's going to happen next and when it's going to happen. So they don't know, in this case, how long they will need remote learning for how many people they need it for. And that's also where WVD is perfect, because it's a pure OpEx model, right? So everybody needs to make a plan right now based on the information that they have. And with WVD, there's no big investment required, because you only pay for it when you use it. So if you need more, then you can pay for more. And if you need less, then you pay less, right? And if you want to stop using it tomorrow, then your investment isn't gone. It's not like you have to buy a server rack, which, by the way, was impossible in COVID times. We've talked to customers that simply went to WVD because when they tried to order new servers, it would take 7 months because it wasn't coming from China, then all this other stuff. So there's all these things that we learned that were impossible before. And the case I also want to highlight for the universities is that we learned not only was it very difficult to invest big money just because they didn't have the budget, and because of this other issue that you couldn't even get on-premises hardware even if you wanted to. The other part, they have yearly budgets, right? And you can imagine that if they are having a hard time predicting how many students will need access and when and for how long, the same thing applies for this government above that, right? So how much budget do we give, or do we have available to give to the universities? So I think that was a great example, and there's many like that, to be honest. It's not really one industry. Everybody had to cope with remote working and remote learning. So I guess that's one big thing that we helped our customers with. Another separate one, which is kind of COVID unrelated in a way, a theme that we see simply is cost savings. And I say it's unrelated to COVID, kind of, because cost savings is always a thing, right? So we had that as a business driver for WVD before COVID happened, and now there's already customers that know, for example, in let's say in the aviation industry, right? I think you can think of all kinds of industries that know that there's a very tough time coming, and cut costs is the only thing that they can do, because increasing their business is not something they can control, right? If you can't fly, then it's very hard to increase your business if you're in aviation. So because of the unique characteristics of WVD, with Windows 10 multi-session, with the fact that you don't pay for the Windows license, with the fact that you don't pay for an RD-Cal, and this complete move to just consumption-based computing, we see a lot of customers using WVD. Some examples, there's like a very large retail chain in Sweden, with probably clothing brands that they've taken their complete on-premises estate, which was one of the largest virtual desktop estates in that country, and moved it to Azure, just because the business case was a no-brainer for them, right? This is a long-term investment for them, and this goes across the industries. There's Germany's a manufacturing country. That's also where we have customers looking at WVD, where they expect their business. So this is their business case is 75% savings compared to what they used to do on-prem.
Yeah.
So, everybody does on-prem differently. Some people are, rocket scientists at it. Some people, didn't have the time or the money, but, a 75% saving is a lot. Energy company in France, expecting to save 3 to 5 times. Other companies are just using this, the learnings from WVD and COVID to, this customer is manufacturing in Turkey, and they are changing completely the way they work, right? So they're closing down offices. They used to have offices in all these different cities, and they're closing it and giving people a home office permanently and having them work from there. And so the commissioning process for them, it's also important to be adopted to market very quickly, has accelerated by 90%.
Wow.
So if you look at those things. And then I have 2 smaller categories, which I think is important to explain how people are using WVD. And one interesting, I call the category, I call it cloud bursting or cloud DR. So there's one aspect of the business where some customers, they have this very seasonal workload, right? So maybe it's a bad example today, but usually in the hotel business, during the summer in Northern Europe, it's very busy, right? It's sometimes 3 times as busy or 4 times or 5 times as it is in winter.
Yeah.
And if you're using a virtual, infrastructure, then on-prem, you half of the year you're paying for something that you're not using, 80% of that. So they love using that to just temporarily use WVD to provide additional, workspaces, if you like. The other one, that's it's actually a bit sad, but it's the reality of today, is that we've had quite a few customers, which of course I won't name, but that were compromised, right? They were hacked.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment in time, they have to do something, right? Because the way that these hacks happen, it means that, they're completely down, right? There's nothing they can do. And as you can probably imagine, if it's a really bad hack, then it will take weeks and years and months to fix it, even if you can. So what some of these customers do is they have to create a completely new remote workspace from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
They're losing millions, right? So the speed to get this up and running is very important. And there's one example of a customer that had 7,000 VMs deployed for their employees in 4 days.
Yeah.
Just so they can continue to work, right? And in fact, they liked it so much that they never went back, right? But that's a different story. But those things are just, because some people say, WVD is just, it's another way of doing VDI, but there's some unique characteristics to it that allow you to do things that you could never do before, even today, right? If you were to start a completely new on-prem environment, I double dare you to go from nothing to 7,000 users in 4 days.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you think about transformation there. You've mentioned transformation about how, from a budget point of view and a cost point of view, WVD has changed things quite considerably for organizations. Yeah. You've also mentioned how it's changing how people work. Obviously, as we've moved to work from home, or we're shutting down offices, etc. But the other one that there is transformation of how it's deployed. All 3 of us have been around the block in the EUC space for quite a long time. And I can remember the first Citrix farm that I ever set up. I dread to think how long it took me and how big the book was that I had to read and how many registry settings I needed to change and all that sort of stuff. I mean, Tom, it's just completely simplified now in terms of how you onboard new users to such a platform.
It is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the key differentiator here is the fact that this is all running on a hyperscale cloud. That fundamentally changes it. So when Michelle says and I often talk about this with customers, is that WVD is not just a new version of what, RDS. It's a major evolution, fundamentally different. Same end use case, same capability, but we're now delivering it from a cloud platform, and the cloud has fundamentally changed computing all up. So the ability to deploy infrastructure via code in an instant and have that provisioned into any one of 64 Azure regions globally in minutes is a fundamental change. And as Michelle said, the ability to say, well, I'm going to start tomorrow and I haven't paid anything. So I haven't gone and submitted an order to some hardware vendor and 6 months later some infrastructure rocks up because you've got a rack and stack. You just deploy your code, and in the time it takes, which could be minutes, could be half an hour, whatever it might be, you've got infrastructure that you can then deploy to your users so that they can then be productive. That is a fundamental change that the cloud has brought to this workload.
Yeah. A quick question for both of you. But, we talk a lot about how this market was growing already. It's then been fueled by COVID and obviously the need to work from home. I mean, what are your thoughts if and when we do return to a level of normality? I mean, I think there's different views on whether that's going to happen or not. But I personally don't see all of a sudden a decline in us going back to deploying workspaces in the way that we did. This isn't just something that is for work from home, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I think you're spot on there. Much like you said, I've deployed Citrix 20 years ago, kind of thing, and I've done it for lots of companies, and as a consultant possibly, or also internally within some large organizations. And this use case has predominantly been around connecting users to a data center where you've located your VMs for security reasons, i.e. there's no footprint left on local devices. Now, yeah. Citrix and VMware and Microsoft, these capabilities have always had a remote working capability, but IT, organizations haven't really deployed this for that use case. So it's always been for, execs or IT who want to do remote support, or for those very small number of people whose job entailed them being remote permanently. But for everyone else who went to the office, it was you went to the office because that's where you did work. I think what we've now realized, in fact, organizations have realized, is that this technology has proven beyond any doubt that you can actually work from anywhere. The technology exists, the underlying platform exists that can scale to meet that demand, such that, why should an organization have expensive offices in the capitals, London and Paris and all these places, which are a huge expense? Why not half the size of those and have people work from wherever? So if they want to work in the office, then they can. I think this is also an opportunity for organizations to sort of reevaluate what an office actually means. Is it lots of desks where people come in to do work? Or is it somewhere that teams come to collaborate for a day a week or whatever it might be, and then go off to wherever they might need to be to do the same work? There's no requirement for people to work in a set office. Obviously there's the benefit of seeing people face to face. That's one of the things I think people have struggled with during this pandemic. And we're social creatures, so we do like to be back together. But I think, like I said, we've proven this capability. There will be massive cost savings and productivity improvements by not having to travel particularly when you don't need to do it.
Yeah, agreed.
We've also spoken to customers, right? And I think there's actually a lot of research already that backs it up. Is that this particular research was in the Netherlands, which is a pretty mature virtual desktop market, I should say. But I think there was 80% of the people that they interviewed, so these are the users, that said that after COVID, they would also want to work at least 2 days from home, where before it was 0. And I think that the other thing that they said was of the largest companies in the Netherlands, I think 70% said that they would never go back to the normal way of working, meaning that you'd have to come into the office every day. So I think it's a given, right? It will not go back. I think it depends on how far it goes back.
Yeah.
It will mean some people are left. Some companies they won't make it, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting, the customers that I'm speaking to that do want to go back and do see, I mean, I've got customers that we've interviewed as part of Disrupt who have already gone back, in fact, and haven't been able to work from home. They're even changing how their strategy on how the workspace is delivered moving forward. Because even if you do go back to the office, and let's say that one of the big banks decide that they're going to send 10,000 people back into Canary Wharf, I think even they are reconsidering their use of virtual desktop infrastructure, desktop as a service, WVD, for instance, because you need that flexibility and you need that ability to give employees and people choice and the flexibility to work from home and from the office. And so I don't see it as two separate things anymore. I mean, they're even talking to me, when they go back into the office, they'll still regard the devices as dirty devices. They'll regard the network in the corporate office as a dirty network, and they'll still authenticate and log in and access their workspace in the same way they do at home as if they do in the office. And for me, I think that just means that you're not going to suddenly see a massive drop off of people that are using WVD and virtual desktops. I think it's actually going to continue on. Yeah.